Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Kieran. With me, as always, is Austin Davidson from Long Island, New York.
Heyo.
I'm broadcasting again from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, inside my mom's lovely apartment. And today we're going to be previewing the Steelers' Christmas Day matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. It is definitely the biggest game of the year, as the Steelers can clinch the AFC North with a win. A loss will put the Ravens in the driver's seat for winning the division. So it is definitely a big-time game, but before we get started, just wanted to wish all of our listeners a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. And it's also the anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. I don't know how big a fan of Steelers history you are, Austin, but do you know about the Immaculate Reception?
Yes, I do. If I could name, this is going to be embarrassing if I don't know the right name. It's Franco Harris, right? He got batted down and into his hands, and he ran it for a touchdown.
That's correct.
Against the Raiders.
Yes, it was the Steelers' first playoff win in their team history. Most people, not just fans, don't realize this, but the Steelers were actually not a very good franchise before the 1970s, being founded in 1933 and not winning their first playoff game until that date in 1972. So it's definitely been a tale of two different parts of the Steelers franchise, but a lot of fans like to point to that as the turning point for the Steelers franchise. So, another note before we get started, just a reminder that there was a game played in the NFL yesterday, but most of the NFL games, the normal slate will be played tomorrow and not on Sunday, with Sunday being Christmas. There will only be two games, including the Steelers games. The Steelers will be going for their first win over the Baltimore Ravens since their second matchup in 2014 and are going for their sixth straight win. And finally, I mentioned this on the last show, but my mom and I are going to be going to the game on Sunday, so I'm assuming in all likelihood you're going to be able to be live tweeting the game, Austin, and if not, then that's okay. Do you think you'll be able to do that?
Yeah, probably.
All right, sounds good. So getting into the playoff picture right now, the Dallas Cowboys most recently clinched the number one seed in the NFC with the Giants losing on Thursday Night Football. The Steelers still have a chance to get the number 2 seed, but in all likelihood they're looking at the number 3 seed. To get the number 2 seed, the Steelers would need to win out and then have a combination of things happen. They need the Raiders to lose their last two games, and the Chiefs would have to go either 1-1 or 0-2. So I'm thinking it's much more likely that the Steelers just win and get the 3 seed. So I don't know what you're thinking, but I think as long as the Steelers get a home playoff game, they'll be in good shape for a long playoff run. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think it should be good. Also, just in case, if we were to lose against the Ravens, it's not all over. What we would need is we would literally only need the Dolphins to lose. We would need the Dolphins to lose against the Bills and against the Patriots. The Bills game might be before the Steelers-Ravens game. I don't know, but we need for safety, we need the Bills to win against the Ravens there. You want to know something interesting?
What?
Even if we lose against the Browns in week 17, as long as the Dolphins lose out, we're still the 6th seed, even if we lose to the Browns on the last game after losing to the Ravens.
Well,
So if worse comes to worse, we need the Dolphins to lose both their games.
are we really going to want to watch the team if they lose to the Browns, though?
No, not really.
But anyways, all joking aside, that is an interesting thing with most of the games being played Saturday. Obviously, other than the late game on Sunday and the Monday Night Football game, you were right. The Dolphins do play at 1:00 on Saturday, so we'll know a lot about the playoff picture going forward before the Steelers game. Actually, so we'll know what the scenarios are and everything like that. So it'll definitely be there's definitely a lot of chances for the Steelers to make it, but the simplest way is to just simply win this week. But things just got a little bit more difficult. I don't know if you saw, but this morning it's reported that Sammy Coates left practice after a hamstring injury, and he's been ruled out of Sunday's game. It could be a season-ending injury, with a hamstring being something that usually takes some time to recover. Other important players like Ladarius Green and Stephon Tuitt are unlikely to play. Green is doubtful and Tuitt is questionable. Other players like Darius Hayward-Bay, Chickalo, and Matthews were limited in practice with Hayward-Bay unlikely to go, and Chicklow and Matthews are both likely to play. D'Angelo Williams seems to be ready to go. He was a full participant in all 3 days of practice this week. Austin, what do you think about the loss of Tuitt and Green? Well, the potential loss of Tuitt and Green and the loss of Sammy Coates this week.
Well, Sammy Coates I don't really care about. It's just kind of like losing like a backup. It's like losing Cody Wallace. Like it doesn't really matter to me. It's as long as he's not like a starter. Ladarius Green is a big one. I thought Ladarius Green would have had a big game if he is playing today, and that really hurts me.
What about Stephon Tuitt?
Stephon Tuitt, I'm sorry, I don't know why I forgot him. Stephon Tuitt, that's also a big one because we're left with L.T. Walton, Ricardo Matthews, who was limited in practice, and who's the last one?
Daniel McCullers and Hargrave.
Yeah, Daniel McCullers and Javon Hargrave. And that's it. And Stephon Tuitt has really been the leader since Cameron Hayward has went down. So it would be a big loss to not have him either.
And I know they played well in the second half against the Bengals last week, but that's not really a formula you want to go with. There's only 4 healthy defensive linemen. Well, 3 if you want to, because Matthews has been limited in practice the last few days. So the Steelers definitely have a bunch of injuries stacking up against them. The Ravens only have one major injury concern, and it looks like it's their cornerback, Jimmy Smith. He's the only player who seems to be unlikely to play. That's actually huge for the Steelers because with all their injuries on offense, particularly with Green, the Steelers are probably going to end up looking Antonio Brown's way more often, and Jimmy Smith is the top cover guy on the Ravens. Maybe Antonio Brown could have a better day. Do you think Antonio Brown is going to see the ball a lot this week?
I actually wrote that in one of my, I think it was in my key players, but I do think so. It's either going to be him or Eli Rogers. Because last time I saw that Antonio Brown was saying that he's never seen a triple coverage like that. He was getting triple covered. That's how bad it was. I think now that they don't have Jimmy Smith, that he's still going to get double covered, which means I think Eli Rogers is going to be opened up. So it's either going to be him who has a big game, or it's going to be Eli Rogers who has a big game.
Okay. Well, we can expand more upon that later, but looking at the Steelers' offense, it's been a group that at the beginning of the year wanted to score around 30 points a game. They haven't been doing that, but they've still been scoring enough points to win, obviously, most of this year. They struggled a lot against the Ravens in the Week 9 matchup. How are the Steelers going to attack the Ravens differently this time? And if they don't, how is it going to be different, I guess?
How is it going to be different? Well, last time the Steelers did not change their game plan until it was a little too late, scoring only 14 points in the fourth quarter. The Steelers tried getting a run game going too much when it simply wasn't working. They refused to give up on it last time. It was really bad. In this game, I hope that if they are making mistakes at halftime, they adjust at halftime and not wait until the fourth quarter to show life. This game should be slightly better than last time because Ben Roethlisberger was still kind of injured last time. He said he wasn't, but at his last practice before the Week 9 game, he was limited, and now he's healthy, and he has been healthy for weeks, so that's something to look forward to. This game is going to be heavily reliant on the what's going to be different is this game is going to be heavily reliant on the people with 1 or 2 catches. This game, I'm looking for Kobe Hamilton to make 1 or 2 big catches and maybe David Johnson to get a big catch this game because Sammy Coates has sadly regressed, as you said, and has been ruled out. So we're down to very few receivers yet again this season. In brighter news, though, like you said, Baltimore's number 1 cornerback, Jimmy Smith, is going to be out, which will allow Eli Rogers or Antonio Brown to get free. What do you think is going to be of this game?
I definitely think that the Steelers are going to end up going out early on and just throwing the ball a lot in this game. I think you're definitely right. They wasted a lot of downs in that first matchup trying to run the ball, and Brandon Williams in the middle, he's just a beast. I don't see the Steelers doing the same thing that they did before. I think they'll try to use that matchup with the Jimmy Smith-less secondary and try to get the ball to Antonio Brown early and often. And I also expect to see Le'Veon Bell out in the slot a lot more often than we have the last few weeks, kind of more like we saw in the beginning portion of the season, especially since guys like Ladarius Green is likely out and Sammy Coates will be out. So I think we'll see that. And I also think we're actually going to see a little bit of D'Angelo Williams. He might not carry the ball a lot, but I think when you split out Bell out to the side, D'Angelo Williams has been a great pass protector in his time with the Steelers. I still think it's nice to have him in there as a nice insurance policy, whether or not he gets the ball or not. But I'm hoping to see the Steelers stretch out the Ravens' defensive front with some early passing and then hopefully hit them up the middle with some runs later in the game when they're tired. They also need to win the time of possession battle. That's definitely a key towards wearing down the Ravens' defense. Looking at the other side of the ball, the Steelers' defense all pretty much shut down the Ravens in that last game, all but like one play. What are the Steelers going to do to stop the Ravens' offense, which has gotten a little bit better over the course of the last few weeks, but mostly has been relatively underwhelming, Austin?
Well, they just got to honestly keep doing what they're doing. The defense played well last time, bearing the missed tackle by Burns and Mitchell. But overall, as a unit, they played well, and they've only gotten more seasoned from there. And this is a better defense now than when the Ravens first saw them. So it's kind of like the same thing. Ravens got better, and so did we. So it's kind of like a lateral movement. But without Tua this time, the defense is going to have to try and step up and make sure they don't get a run game, because I fear that the Ravens might develop one without Tua there. But I don't think they're going to be successful in the air whatsoever. So I think it's still going to balance out, even if they do get a run game. The Steelers just got to play smart. That's really it. I think the defense isn't going to be the problem here. What do you think?
I guess I'm optimistic about the passing game on defense, and I'm a little concerned about the rushing game defensively. You know, we already talked about Stephon Tuitt, who's unlikely to play this week. And we saw how the Bengals, at least in the first half, continuously just gashed the Steelers. We had linemen at different levels of the line of scrimmage. And then we had guys like Jeremy Hill and Rex Burkhead running downhill. I don't know if Terrence West or Kenneth Dixon are the level of Jeremy Hill, but they're definitely quality players. They're in the NFL. If they get open space, they'll be in good shape. But even though the Steelers shut down the run in the second half last week, and they shut down the Ravens' ground game last time, I'm still a little worried just because I do think the Ravens' offensive line is a little bit better, particularly Marshall Yanda. Just watching him over the last few years, he's such a talented player, and I just remember all too well guys like Justin Forsett and Ray Rice gashing the Steelers every now and then in certain games, and it's definitely a concern, especially if Tuitt's not playing. The defensive linemen are going to have to step up big time. The good news is that through the air, as bad as Ben Roethlisberger has been on the road this season, Joe Flacco has been even worse. He has 5 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and I forget, Austin, who did the Ravens beat on the road? I know they beat the Jets. Wait, was it the Jets? I'm thinking of the Bengals. I think the Ravens have only had a couple of good road wins this year, haven't they?
I'm not quite sure myself. They've versus some pretty easy people like Jacksonville and teams like that. So I'm not sure. I think Jacksonville is one of their road wins.
Well, let me confirm this for you. In weeks 2 and 3, they beat Cleveland and Jacksonville. That's not the strongest road teams. They lost to the Jets on the road as well. Those are their only 2 wins that I see on the road this year. So they're definitely not a good team on the road. And like we mentioned with Flacco, his struggles on the road in combination with Ben Roethlisberger's strong play at home make me believe that the Steelers can, if the Steelers can take away the running game and score early enough, make the Ravens play some come from behind football, then they just have to remember their fundamentals and just remember to tackle Mike Mitchell and Artie Burns specifically. But no, seriously, as long as they play smart and shut down the running game, I think they'll do a good job of keeping the Ravens out of the end zone. What are the keys for the game, Austin? We got one on offense and defense, so you go first.
All right, I'll start with my offense first. Someone has to step up that's not named Antonio Brown or Le'Veon Bell. We've been saying this for several weeks now. But Ben Roethlisberger said himself that he isn't expecting these young guys to make 6 or 7 catches a game, just the 1 or 2 key catches that come their way. I would have felt much greater about this if Ladarius Green was playing. I could have said that he was probably stepping up, but it's down to Eli Rogers, Kobe Hamilton, and the rest of the tight ends to try and step up in his place. And now on defense, the key is to minimize penalties. Penalties were a huge problem last time. And honestly, this could go for either offense or defense, but it felt like the defense was the bigger culprit last time. If the Steelers could keep the penalty count low, this time, a.k.a. not shooting themselves in the foot, this should be a win. This should go in the W column. I'm sorry.
That's
what are your
okay.
keys to the game?
Real quickly, I just wanted to say I completely forgot. I didn't forget, but it didn't even occur to me that the penalties were something I should have even considered, because it's something that the Steelers have had trouble with even in the first half of last week's game. We've been talking about it, I feel like, as long as we've been doing this podcast, that there have been unnecessary penalties, and there's going to be penalties, but you just need to stop the stupid ones, like the pre-play ones. And on defense, you just gotta be smart and stuff like that. On offense, it's just like you said, other guys need to step up, whether it's Jesse James, Xavier Grimble, Kobe Hamilton, or Eli Rogers, or just a combination of all of them. It's expected that Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell are going to get their usual touches and yards, but the difference is going to be the difference between this offense putting up 17 points and 27 points, in my opinion, is going to be whether or not these guys can make plays when they're counted on, specifically at the tight end position without Ladarius Green. As long as Kobe Hamilton makes his usual 1 or 2 catches on third down and Eli Rogers chips in usually his 4 to 6 catches from anywhere between 40 to 80 yards, the Steelers should be in decent shape. But I'm looking particularly at Jesse James and Xavier Grimble. Xavier Grimble has been mostly inactive or off the field since Ladarius Green returned, but he was okay in some limited time this year. Jesse James is someone I've harped on a lot this year. He's really struggled since Ladarius Green came back in the lineup. He hasn't been that great of a blocker, and he's had some key drops that have really annoyed me at times this year. But I'm hoping that he gets some more opportunities, and maybe some more passes going his way will get him in a better rhythm. Maybe he'll play a little better. That's what I'm hoping. On defense, I know I just keyed in on the running game, but for me, the one big key is to get pressure. We all know that Joe Flacco isn't exactly Andy Dalton when it comes to mobility, but the Steelers, traditionally, when they've been able to pressure Joe Flacco, they've won. When they haven't, they've lost. And the Steelers' defense really started turning it around in Cleveland when they were getting pressure. They got 8 sacks in that game, and while they haven't gotten sacks necessarily at times during this 5-game winning streak, they've gotten pressure consistently. Even Andy Dalton, they only had 1 sack against him last week, but they were consistently getting in the backfield. And that's definitely a key for someone like Joe Flacco, who's not going to be running around. Pressuring him and getting him to throw before he wants to can create turnovers. And I think James Harrison, it feels like whenever they play the Ravens, he just elevates his play to another level. I think Timmons, and Shazier are all going to have huge games, and I think that's definitely a key on defense. Looking at X factors, who is your X factor on both the Ravens and Steelers offense and defense, Austin?
I'm going to start with the Ravens here. I'm going to go with offensively Kenneth Dixon. It's a somewhat easy pick for me looking at their offense. Over the past couple of weeks, he's gotten an increase in snap count because of his pass-catching capabilities and because of his explosion when he carries the ball. He is very good on screen passes and will cause a lot of trouble for a team that is awful at stopping running backs who catch the ball out of the backfield. On the Ravens' defensive side, I believe I gave it to him in the Week 9 episode as well, but C.J. Mosley, he's a great run-stopping linebacker. He's a Pro Bowl linebacker yet again, and he's part of the reason why Baltimore is ranked the second-best rushing defense. He's going to be huge in trying to shut down Bell again. How about you? Who do you got for the Ravens?
On offense, I think you have to look no further than the last time they met, and it was the guy who scored the biggest touchdown of the game. It was Mike Wallace. The former Steeler has constantly been a burner throughout his entire career, and he can change the course of the game in an instant with his speed and ability to beat someone deep. We all know about Joe Flacco's affinity for the deep ball, and that can't be ignored, as well as Wallace's numbers approaching another 1,000-yard season. If the Steelers can take him away and keep him and Flacco from connecting on, I think I think if they connect once, that's probably going to happen just with how often Flacco throws it deep. But I think if you can take him away and don't allow more than 2 passes of, say, I don't know, 25 yards or more, I think the Steelers are going to be in a good position to win, especially on the defensive battle. Looking at the other side of the ball, Brandon Williams, I already mentioned about how great of a player he is. He is truly deserving of the Pro Bowl, and in my opinion, he's the best player on the Ravens at this point in time, maybe outside of C.J. Mosley. I think he played a big part in the reason the Steelers' run game got shut down back in Week 9. And for the Steelers to slow him down, I think it's all going to be about being physical with him, double-teaming him, and make sure he's running around with some misdirection runs, some quick screens and passes, making sure that he's on the field a lot and trying to use up some energy and make sure he's tired by the end of the game. He may not show up on the stat sheet much, but watching his tape, he can really wreck the Steelers' ground game, and that could be a big problem for the Steelers if they keep trying to run the ball. If he disappears at times and doesn't make as big of an impact as we're used to seeing, I think the Steelers are going to win. What about for the Steelers, Austin?
Offensively, I really wanted it to be Ladarius Green. I really did. But obviously it's pointing to him not playing. So my X factor is going to be Jesse James, sadly. Jesse James has had a rather unimpressive career so far, and I would like to see him have a good game here. And if he does, that could be all it takes for a win. I don't think we've seen a big game from Jesse James. I can't recall what his biggest game is, but it would be nice for him to have one right now. This is a very important game to have one. And on the defensive side, I have Mike Mitchell. He's coming back pissed off. He remembers what happened with Mike Wallace. He also probably just got snubbed from the Pro Bowl. He's going out there to prove to everyone that he is a great safety. He's going to have a fantastic game against the Ravens because he's pissed off. And how about you?
Well, you mentioning Jesse James actually just intrigued me as far as his biggest game. So here, looking at his game logs, I know that he caught 3 touchdowns last year, and he has 1 this year. Looking back, I'm sorry, did I say that wrong? I think I meant to say he had 3 this year and 1 last year. Yeah, that's right. He had 1 last year. I remember it was a game against the Raiders that I think was the go-ahead touchdown, and then this year he has 3. That's what I meant to say. So looking at his game logs here quickly, he has a career high of 6 receptions for 43 yards and a touchdown. That's definitely not eye-popping. I mean, it's a nice day, don't get me wrong, but it definitely would be nice to see him come up with, I don't know, maybe 8 for 85 or something and a touchdown. He's 6'7", so maybe you could get him matched up in a one-on-one in the end zone this Sunday. Anyways, going back to your question, for me it's Antonio Brown. Without Ladarius Green, most likely, and the likelihood that the Ravens are going to try to slow down Le'Veon Bell on the ground, it is absolutely imperative that Antonio Brown has a big game against the Ravens. Traditionally, he hasn't been as good against the Ravens as he has against the rest of the NFL, but I think the injury to Jimmy Smith is going to give Brown the advantage he needs to have a big game. And I'll get into the specifics of that later, but I think he's definitely the X factor on offense. On the other side of the ball, it's got to be Javon Hargrave for me. When Cameron Hayward was lost for the season, Stephon Tuitt's play rose to another level, as well as the entire defense. But someone who may have went a little unnoticed early on in that winning streak was Javon Hargrave. Sorry, when Hayward went out, Tuitt and Hargrave became the main pass-rushing defensive linemen, as Hargrave was mostly someone who'd stay in place to keep contained early on as the nose tackle, but he was able to rush the passer when Hayward went out with an injury. Now with Hargrave being the best Steelers healthy defensive lineman in all likelihood, he's going to be asked to take on double teams again. He's going to have to be the guy that rushes the passer and stops the run. It's a tough task, but I think he's going to be able to do it. And if he does what I think he can do, I think the Steelers are definitely going to be able to slow down the run and beat up on the Ravens offensive line. I think that Hargrave can come up with the sack too. But anyways, let's look forward to some bold predictions. Do you have any, Austin?
Oh, yeah, I have 2. I'm going to say that Mike Mitchell forces a fumble and has an interception, because I really think Mike Mitchell is coming back to have a great game. And then I also think Eli Rogers has 6 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown, and that kind of tells you that I pick Eli Rogers. I have a big game over Antonio Brown. I think that Antonio Brown's going to be double covered the whole game, and it's just going to open up Eli Rogers. What about you? What are your bold predictions?
Really quickly, I thought it was funny. Did you see what was going on with Mike Mitchell and Steve Smith this week? You remember what happened last time and then this week too?
I remember what happened last time. I didn't see this week. What happened this week?
Well, they're just getting really fired up, basically. It's going to be interesting because those guys are former teammates on the Panthers. We already know that Mike Mitchell was a hard hitter, but for those who don't know, Steve Smith has been one of the more well-known, I guess, physical receivers of his time. It's definitely something I'm looking forward to, and it really just has that traditional Steelers-Ravens feel to it when you think about Mike Mitchell and Steve Smith, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, my bold predictions. I think I mentioned him earlier. I think James Harrison plays some throwback football, and we see what James Harrison did in his first breakout game when he had 3.5 sacks on a Monday Night Football game in 2007 against the same Ravens. I don't think it'll be quite as dominant, but I think he pushes the pocket a lot in this game and comes up with 2 sacks. And I just think that this is a game that Antonio Brown absolutely has to break through in, and that's why I think he's going to finish with 7 catches for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. I certainly could be wrong about that because you are right. He will be double covered, but I'm just wishfully thinking that he's going to be able to beat that double coverage because over the last couple of years he has traditionally over most teams, and I just think this is a game that he absolutely has to. Your predictions for the final score, Austin?
I think it's going to be really close. Steelers win 20-17 and ensure their playoff berth. What is your final score?
I think that the Steelers are also going to win in a very close manner, just a little bit different than yours, 23-20. I just think the injuries to Green to it, and I guess Coates is a minor injury, but just with Green being out, it's just another player that the Steelers really didn't need another injury from that position group. I just think it's going to be closer than most people think. Even with Joe Flacco struggles on the road, I think the Steelers win a close one. Maybe a late field goal by Chris Boswell and some. It's supposed to be rainy there, Austin. I don't know how it's going to affect the kicking conditions, but there's 2 good kickers on these teams, and I think Chris Boswell is going to have the last laugh this time.
I hope so.
It will definitely be an icing on the cake for me and my mother who are going to the game. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're looking forward to it. So is there anything else you wanted to add quickly before we wrap this up?
Yeah, man, just have fun at the game. Enjoy for me and all the viewers. Well,
Absolutely. Austin, I'll definitely be talking to you throughout, but to all of our listeners, have a Merry Christmas and a very happy holidays, and let's hope that next time you're listening to us, we're celebrating an AFC North championship. Isn't that right, buddy?
Oh, I hope so.
All right. Before we get going, just wanted to mention, as we always do, that if you wanted to follow our show, we're on Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Our Facebook and Twitter handles are STS Podcast 1. We're just under the title Stronger Than Steel Podcast on SoundCloud and YouTube. We typically post on SoundCloud right after we record. YouTube takes a little longer to process and upload the video, obviously, but we like to post there too. And we're also on email. Feel free to email the show at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com with any feedback or questions that you want to ask us. We'd be happy to answer them. Austin, it's been a pleasure as always, and we're looking forward to the game on Sunday. You have a good day, buddy.
You too.
Go Steelers.